Hey Jared, thanks for reaching out to me and sending me your swing videos. I'm excited to take a look at them and see if I can help you play a little better here. First of all, let me say that obviously you've got a really good swing. You do a lot of things in your swing that I love, and it appears as though you do a lot of those things very naturally. So obviously there's no overhauling that needs to occur to your golf swing, just a few small tweaks here and there. I'm assuming that the iron you're hitting in these videos is either a 6 or a 7 iron. Let me start by saying there's a couple of small things from a setup perspective that I would change or tweak. If we're looking at the video here on the left, the first thing that kind of stands out to me is that there's quite a bit of what we call secondary axis tilt, and that would be kind of your spine tilt, for lack of a better word. You seem to be excessively tilted slightly toward the right, and that kind of manifests itself in a few other ways in your golf swing. First of all, let me go ahead and just take it to the top. You mentioned in your videos that you feel like your swing is too long, and I think you also said that you have a tendency to hit shots thin, sometimes fat, thin, and your miss is sort of a pull draw or an overdraw. I can see some things in your swing that would definitely sort of lend itself to that ball flight error. I'm just kind of taking it to the top of your backswing here, and in both, kind of in both frames here. The length of your swing doesn't concern me. It's why the swing is so long. And here's a couple of things that I'll say. Most players that come to me or say, "Hey, my swing's too long. How do I shorten it?" I'm not big on shortening swings, but I am big on improving arm structure to where the golfer's pretty much making as big a turn as they can, but the swing isn't, quote, long because the arm structure is solid. Now, when I see players who swing gets too long, it's generally in one of two reasons, okay? So first of all, for you, if you look here on the right, at the top of the golf swing, your left wrist, in my opinion, is overly extended. And if you're not sure what extension is, just hold your left hand out in front of you. If you sort of bow or arch your wrist, that would be called flexion. And if you sort of cup your wrist, that would be called extension. And typically, when you think about the cocking, the hinging and unhinging of the club in your left hand, if the lead wrist or if that left wrist is not in extension, the range of motion is limited there. The more that you extend the lead wrist, the more that you can cock or hinge or lag the club, so to speak. There's all kinds of different words for it. But the greater range of motion you'll have in that wrist joint. That's one of the reasons why the swing is a little bit too, I don't really call it long, I just call it narrow. Very narrow at the top, okay? So that wrist, kind of cupping that left wrist there, is kind of an issue. Kind of a wrist angle that I like to see. I'll bring up one real quick. Here's Adam Scott. You'll notice at the top, you'll see much more of a flatter left wrist. He's definitely not bowed or arch. I would consider him more in the flat category. You'll notice nice flat left wrist, and you'll also notice that the right wrist is sort of bent back. And you can see there's a little bit of an angle there. In your swing, you kind of lose that right wrist bend just a little bit to accommodate the extension in the left wrist. So that's kind of where I would start. Number one, I'd try to clean up that wrist angle just a little bit. And another indicator, that the wrist is extending is if you look at the club face, and this doesn't necessarily mean it's open or closed, it just gives me an idea of the type of grip you're using, and what the wrist is doing is the toe of your golf club is kind of hanging down here. Whereas Whereas, if you look at Adam Scott, it's kind of more at an angle there. Again, I'd like to see you flatten that left wrist at the top. That's going to automatically kind of shorten your swing just a little bit. Here's the next thing I would do. Again, looking at the picture here on the right, I see swings that are too long because the right arm is over-flexing or over-bending. Okay? I only like to see the right arm bend to about 90 degrees. So in your case, it would be somewhere probably about right in there. Okay? Now, you're a flexible guy, and you can make a pretty big shoulder turn, so I think you'll get to parallel easily, even if you are close to parallel, even if you don't overflex that right arm. Okay? I think the right arm is just overflexing, kind of collapsing on you, and that's why you're getting a little bit narrow at the top. All right? Having this long backswing and narrow position at the top, just because it looks a certain way on camera isn't necessarily an issue. The issue that it creates is when you start down, if you look at the picture here on the left, you can see you get very narrow in transition. When I say narrow, what I mean by that is the shaft is very, very close to your body. Okay, there's not very much room there. And there's a huge angle formed between left arm and shaft. And I know you're probably thinking, well, that's what everybody says is great, and you should do that, and you should try to have a lot of lag, and yada, yada, yada. And I really don't subscribe to that theory at all. I see guys who have deep wrist angles, guys who have their left wrist in extension. So the same picture that we're looking at here on the right of the extension, that is also occurring in your downstroke, or you wouldn't have that much lag, so to speak. And I hate to even use the term lag, but it's a commonly understood term, so I feel like I can use that with you. Because you get, here's the issue, because you get so narrow at the top, we have to figure out a way to get the club head down to the ball some way, somehow. And how that manifests itself in your swing is a ton of what we call right side bend or lateral side bend. And that is you flexing from the waist to your right, leaning to your right, tilting to your right, bending to the right. That lateral side bend, it's going to have a lot of implications in your golf swing. Number one, when you start tilting to the left, tilting back away from the target like that, you can see how much your spine's tilting to the right. We haven't even gotten to the ball yet. I'll go ahead and take it to impact. About right there, you can see there is an excessive right side bend in your golf swing. Okay, what goes with right side bend? A lot of forward shaft lean, and it has to, because that's what keeps you from, you got to make up the difference as this right shoulder here gets closer to the ground. I mean, we got to figure out a way to not stick the club in the ground way back here. And the way to do that is to lean the handle forward. Okay, that all comes from the fact that you get narrow in transition. If you were to go to the top and you were to feel your wrist angle sort of coming out, as if you were like, I'll show you here in a demonstration. Imagine that my yellow line is the shaft. If you were feeling sort of an unhinging type of motion, or you were feeling, a natural unhinging motion, not a casting or a throwing, but a more, simply put, instead of the left wrist extending, if the left wrist was to flex in transition, we would see the shaft, that angle start to come out a bit. Now, as that angle started to come out naturally, the low point of your swing arc, if you did all that tilting, would be way back here behind the golf ball. And the same way that you learn to tilt your spine, you would learn to not tilt your spine as much in the downstroke. Okay? So by creating a little more width at the top of your backswing, by A, not extending your left wrist, B, not over flexing your right arm, and C, when you transition, I'd like to see the lead wrist flexing a bit more instead of extending. And and I'll show you a left wrist that's flexing. Again, I'm going to use Adam Scott here just real quick. Watch how the lead wrist starts to bow and arch in transition. His hand doesn't look anything like yours, and as it keeps coming down, you can see it bowing and arching even more. Okay? And in your case, we really don't see that. That butt of the club is already turning the corner. You really can't see. You never really see your lead wrist get. It's probably in flexion, but not deep enough here to get the sweet spot inside the hand path. And again, you can't do that because you are so narrow in transition. You have to just start right side bending, right tilting, right tilting, right tilting. Okay, and it's kind of a move that generates a rightward path. And I think you said you mentioned that you hit a draw, but because your right arm has to stay bent so long in the downswing, well past impact, your right arm is bent significantly more. If you look at Adam Scott there, that force, the force of the right arm straightening in the downswing and happening so late in your golf swing creates a very fast overtaking rate of the club head. And what I mean by that is you can see how the club kind of flips over on you here in the exit, and there's a better view of it here on the face on. Let me zoom this in just a little bit. Better view of it here, you'll really start to see that fast overtaking rate, how the club face is almost pointing to the ground here. Okay? Right hand's released hard over the top of the left. That's where those pulls are coming from.